Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Tejano's virtual event. This session will be recorded so that it can be available for viewing by those that cannot attend. Today we have with us Lizzie Ochoa, librarian at both PCC and UTEP. Before we begin, I would like to let you know that you can get points from the Tejano Passport program for attending these sessions. I will put the link in the chat box so that you can click on it for this event. Thank you, Ms. Ochoa, for presenting today. Without further ado, here she is.
Hey, Adrian, welcome everybody. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of some of the work that I do, and then we'll get into actually drawing. And what we're going to do, we're going to approach drawing a little bit differently than what you might have done in school. The whole process of what we're going to do today is to remove like any mental blocks or any hesitation that people say I don't know how to draw or you want that ability, and those are just misconceptions. So here's a sample of some of my work. If you can see my arrow, I've got a collection of some oil paintings, some digital paintings. And what I really want to stress is that, you're going to find ways to use creativity in every part of your life, not just art. A lot of times we think creativity has to do with the art, anything connected to that. But it really, the more stuff that you do, you're following your curiosity, you're following your interest, and you're also learning how to be a creative problem solver. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. And that's just kind of a little sample of some of the stuff. I used to be the art librarian at the El Paso Museum of Art a few years ago. And part of my duties included not only running the library, but also promoting a lot of exhibits. So what's pictured there, well, thank you for all the nice comments. What's pictured there is we have two versions of Tom Lee for Tom Lee Month. Those were on display at the History Museum. Sitting atop is Marc Chagall, and that was to promote one of our Marc Chagall exhibits. Then we had Andy Warhol was our first stand-up, and we used him kind of as a selfie location that brought a lot of people into the exhibit. And then the gentleman on the the right-hand corner is Hal Marcus when he had his solo show. And pictured over here on the left hand are some of the sculptures that I've done. I've had, it's kind of like with creativity, it's not just limited to like one medium. You kind of sometimes, let's say that you take a picture and that picture is going to work just as a picture on its own. It doesn't have to be a painting. It doesn't have to be a sculpture. And that's kind of what I've done with a lot of stuff that I do. And occasionally you do run into like some creativity blocks. And I want you to kind of imagine like if you see like a little stream and it gets blocked up with rocks, the water's going to find another way to get through those rocks. And so a few years ago, I hit kind of a creativity block. I couldn't draw, couldn't paint, or at least I didn't feel the inspiration for it. So we'll go on to the next slide. And I've always had interest in guitars and music. I've been teaching myself guitar for a few years. And what I started doing was buying like beat up guitars off of locally and then rewiring them, refinishing them. And I found that very satisfying because it worked past the mental block I was having with all the other stuff. So it kind of diverted my attention, but at the same time I was still allowing that creativity to flow. So what we're going to do, we'll go on to the next slide. And what we're going to think of, we're not going to think of drawing as the full picture. We're going to think of it as like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. And so this is where we come into negative and positive space. If you look at the picture on the left hand, that's by M.C. Escher. You can see that the positive space would be these that are flying, but then as it goes to the lower part of the picture, the positive space becomes a fish, and the negative space becomes a space in between them. And then just to further illustrate it, I added some jigsaws. So when you're drawing, we're actually going to be thinking of shapes, not so much what we're drawing, but just the shapes in relation to the shapes next to them. And what's interesting about this process is it turns off that overcritical mind, that negative self-talk where you say, oh, I can't draw a face, I can't draw, a car. And it shuts all that thinking down, and we start to think of things just as shapes. So that's what we'll be doing today. We're not going to actually be, you won't have something to look at, but you'll be following along with the lines that I'm drawing, and we'll get to see how shape relates to other shape. And what's really cool about it, like especially if you look at that jigsaw piece at the very bottom right-hand corner, we have, again, negative and positive space, but one shape is going to be the shape next to it, and that's how we judge our accuracy. Okay. So what we're going to, we'll go on to the next slide. And so the most important thing is to just relax, enjoy the process, follow your interests, follow your curiosity, and have fun. That's the main thing. You're exploring, and you're not really so focused on the outcome. You don't want the outcome to stress you out. The whole thing is just taking a journey to it. And then once we reach that destination, we can move on from there. It's an ever, I would say, a never-ending learning process, a never-ending journey. It's like all of a sudden you wake up and say, okay, I'm a great artist. It's like you have to keep practicing like everything else, but the whole thing is just to explore it and be kind with yourself. So we're going to go ahead and start. And all you need is a piece of paper, just a regular pencil, nothing fancy, maybe an eraser. And I'm going to go ahead and go on to our camera. Sure that we've got our.
Are you going to share your camera, Lizzie?
Okay, let me go ahead and.
Okay, Lizzie, we see your sketchbook.
Your mic is muted. I don't know if you.
Lizzie, we're not getting any audio from you.
All right, how's that?
Yes.
Can you all hear me there? Okay, and you can see the screen okay?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to hold the pencil. You're not going to be holding it like if you were writing your name, and you're not going to be putting the same amount of pressure. You're just going to kind of relax your grip, just kind of let it sit there and hold it back a little bit further than you're used to doing when you write with a pencil. So we're just going to lightly touch the paper. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start to explore negative and positive shape. We're not going to get too much. We probably won't have time to get into shape, but you're going to end up with the drawing of something good. So remember, you just need a pencil. Type of paper is good, copy paper. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my pencil up here. And I'm going to leave a little bit of space, little tiny bit of space at the top. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And I'm just going to keep my pencil line very, very light. This is kind of exploring. think of it like if you were sculpting clay, you'd be pushing the clay around, and that's what we're doing. We're not looking for really hard, sharp lines. So I'm putting just a little bit of a curve here. And now I'm going to bring this line down this way. So we've created our first shape, and now we're starting to create our negative space. And I'm going to go ahead and change my pencil line. I'm going to come up almost to the top of the paper. So we're not aiming for perfection. We're just aiming for getting the general direction of the line. Okay. So now I'm going to come back over here and change the direction of my line. Okay. Now I'm going to come to our other shape that we have here and down just a little bit further. Okay. So you'll be jumping around to create the shape. We're not going to be thinking of just a consecutive perfect line or anything. So I'm going to come back to this point, our starting point. And I'm going to make just a little curve here. Okay. So let me know if I'm going too fast. I want to just make sure that kind of understanding what we're doing is we're building both our positive shape and our negative shape. Okay. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to come back just a little bit inward. And I've created another shape within the shape. Now I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to change my pencil direction just slightly. I made another little change in direction right here. And I'm going to come down pretty far. I don't want to go too fast. Do we have any questions so far? Everybody okay? Right. So we're going to continue this same path. And now I'm going to change directions just a little bit. And now we're going to bring the pencil in this direction. That's correct. Yeah, you guys are already guessing. And just change direction again. Okay. And now we're going to bring that pencil line up. And what I'm going to do is come back over here a little bit further to the middle of this line right here. And change the direction of the line as well. Okay, now from there, I'm going to turn around from this direction. And bring it all the way down to the edge of the paper. So in doing so, we've created this whole negative space all the way around. And this in turn gives us, well, vice versa, actually, we recreated this positive space and we created our negative space as default. So you get two shapes for the price of one. And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to bring the pencil line inward. I'm sure you can already tell what we're drawing. I found this process works really well because it removes that apprehension of making a mistake or it not looking right, and everybody's style is going to be very different. Like we'll all end up with a bunch of different versions, and that's the best thing you can do as an artist and as a creative thinker. It's always going to be your version, your perspective. So what I did is I brought this up here. And I just kind of rounded it out. And then I came back up here to the bottom and added a little bit more of a line. But I'm not going to quite connect them yet. So from right here, I'm going to come back to the very bottom here. Once we have all our lines in, then we'll be able to adjust and kind of say, okay, well, we can make this a little bit bigger or a little bit thicker. So I'm going to bring down this curve here. And we're going to take it all the way to the edge of the paper. And I'm kind of adjusting myself just by keeping that loose line there. So I made it just a little bit wider, and we can always go back and erase that line, or we can use that as part of our shading. Okay. And so now I'm going to come back over here, and we're going to start, now that we've got our positive space and our negative space behind, we're going to get into some of the details. So right here, this little shape is actually going to be part of the mane. And we're going to create just a little shape in here. So what we've done here is we've created this little space as part of our background, our negative space. We created a little piece of the mane, and in doing so, we've also created the other part of the ear as it continues. So from here, I'm going to come back to this spot. I'm just going to bring that line almost across the face. I'm going to come back to this shape that I made and continue my line up here. Now I'm going to bring another line right here to continue where the ear is, but we're going to bring the mane up. eye. Yeah, we have a few mascots here, 4 to be exact. Usually tell me if I'm on the right track with the painting or drawing. They're my biggest critics. Yeah, definitely, Adrian. So what I did here is I came back to the edge of the ear, the bottom of the second ear, and I'm just going to draw this little strand of hair. And I'm going to come back this direction. And I'm going to create another shape within the shape. Thank you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another line up. We're going to come back to the base of the ear. And we're going to add a little bit here to the top of the mane. So now I'm going to bring another line in, and this is just going to give us a little bit of an idea of the strands of hair on the mane. Okay. I'm going to bring just another line over here. And now we're going to start to explore the face of it. So we're going to come about to right here where this little point is. This is the forehead. Come up just maybe diagonal, just a little ways from it. And we're going to create just a little curve here. And this is going to lead us to the horse's eye. I'm going to come back to the end of the line right here. And this is creating the horse's eyelid. And then we come back to this corner here. And we're going to create just a little bit of a curve. It's going to go kind of slanting inward. This is creating the eyeball. And we're going to bring it to meet this other line. I'm just going to adjust it just a little bit by bringing this a little bit further. And that can also be part of our shading. So we have another little line right here, right under the eyeball. So I made a little bit of a slant here, and then I straightened out about right here. And what I'm going to do is follow that up, leave a little bit of space in between, because that's going to also give us a map for our shading. And now with this line, I'm creating the bottom part of the eyelid. So once we do that, we're going to come back to the eyeball, and we're going to put a little shape in here. This is going to be a highlight. So we're just kind of starting to fill in information that'll help us when we get to the shading part. So now I'm going to come back just a little ways down from this line to about right here. I'm going to create just a little slant. And again, I'm going to create a shape like this. It's going to give us more of the snout structure. So it doesn't have to be too long. Maybe we can bring it up a little bit higher there. And now that's going to lead us down to the nostril shape. So we're going to come to this point here. And we're going to come just a little bit inward. And we're going to draw a diagonal shape. So we have the line changing directions again. And coming up this direction. Now I'm going to flatten it up right here. So we've kind of made almost like a backwards G in a way. So now I'm going to bring this shape in. And I'm going to complete my shape right here. So this gives us a horse's nostril. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come down lower to make the mouth. And so I'm bringing just a little bit of a slant here. What I'm going to do here is just kind of do a little self-adjustment. So I'm going to narrow this just a tiny bit. And now what we're going to do is we're going to explore the shadow around the nostril to give it a little bit more dimension. So I'm going to start right here, right under this little area. And I'm going to kind of follow this line a little bit. I'm going to come back just a little higher. And create this little shape right here. And now we're going to fill in this space right here between the eye and the nose to create a little bit more structure for the snout. I'm going to come back just a little bit, leave a little bit of space between this area.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Sorry about that. I don't know why it did that. Okay. So I'm going to bring this line up here. And this is going to make a little bit of a Y shape. So I'm actually going to change my direction right here. And bring this over here. Now we have another little shape in here. It's kind of like an elongated triangle. So not too much. Now I'm going to come back to the eye here. And I'm going to create just a little bit of an area that's going to help us with our shading. Give us the idea that the eye is projecting a little bit forward. So now we're ready to come back into the jawline. So we're going to come back to the shape that we just made. And we're going to come back just maybe a little diagonal from there. And we're going to start our new path. So I'm going to make this shape a little bit wider. So we're following the path back, but we're leaving a little bit of space in between. So from that point, I'm going to change direction again. I'm going to come right into the jawline. I'm going to come down just a speck, and we're going to make this a little bit wider. Okay. And now we're going to come back to the shape that we just made, this little area. And we're going to create another little shape right here. Now we're going to fill in this little area here with a couple more shapes. This is just for the sake of shading. I just do this little sliver line here, and I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to leave a little bit of space right there. Okay. So now we've got the complete horse's head, and now we're going to start to explore the muscles in the neck. So we've got a little shape right here. We're going to come back right under the jaw. We're going to create just a little shape here. And I'm going to change direction again and follow the outline of the horse's neck. So from here, I'm going to create another little shape within the shape. I'm going to come back to this little point. I'm going to leave a little space on either side and start a new shape. And I'm going to come back around here and go back up where I came from. And now I'm going to just leave a little bit of room here, a little space here. Come down just a little bit lower. I'm going to put in a new line. And we'll make that a little bit wider. And bring it all the way down to the edge of the paper. And now what we're going to do here is we're going to the top of the jaw here, and we're going to just space over a little bit right here, and we're going to create a new line to show another muscle. Okay, so I didn't quite bring it down to the edge of the paper. I'm going to come back up where I started and then make it a little bit wider. And then I'm going to bring up the shape again. Not too far up. And make that wider as well. I'm going to bring that to the almost to the edge of the paper. Well, actually, we'll bring it to the edge of the paper. And so now what we're going to do is, let's see, make sure we got everything in there. I'm going to create just another little shape that projects right here, just to give us an idea of the bone structure. And from there, we're ready to start shading. So when we get to shading, this is a little different because we started with shape. And shape is what we've just done right now, but when we start to put in our direction of light, let's say that the light is coming from maybe this angle, we're going to start to see shadow, and shadow is what turns shape into form, and it's going to be more dimensional. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this side of our pencil and just hold it just like you were doing before, almost like when you hold a fork or a spoon. So we're going to start to put in a little bit of, oh, look, one last thing I forgot. We have just a little shape in here for the ear. Then we'll start our shading. It just looks like a little flame. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start with the eye. And I'm going to create a little bit of shadow right here. There's no right or wrong way. It's almost like coloring with a crayon. You just want to keep it soft, and you can always go back and darken certain areas.
Lizzie, your
Lizzie,
screen
sorry,
froze.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see what the camera's doing. Okay, I don't know why it's turned off the camera. I'm so sorry. Let me try something here. Let me try refreshing the screen and seeing if we.
We'll wait.
Okay, how's that? Everybody good? Not sure why it does that, but
It looks like it might be ready.
can you see the image?
We do see the
Yeah.
image. It's not moving, but I'm sure it will once you get in there.
Oh yeah. There's my head. Okay.
There you go.
So now we're gonna continue with the eye. And I'm gonna darken this part of the eyelid.
We might have missed one last step. Can you rewind maybe one step?
Sure, I think before we started the shading, we put this little shape right inside the ear.
Oh, right.
That,
Mine's missing.
yeah, that was the last of our shapes. So now what I'm gonna do in these shapes that we made, we're gonna actually start to fill them in. It's okay if you want to add a little bit more pressure, like to areas that are going to be a little bit darker. But again, there's no right or wrong way. You can just kind of either fill it in and making little circles or strokes. And this will help us define more of the face. And this is usually how I start a painting. I'll put out, basically this is a map of a painting. So when you start to fill it in, this will give you an idea. It's like, okay, I'm going to put some shadow here, and this is the structure here. So it's It's pretty helpful. I'm going to create a little more shadow up here. And I'm going to bring in just a little bit of shadow here just to give the idea that the eye projects a little bit more than the rest of the face or the rest of this area. And we'll come back up here to the eyelid. I'm going to lightly fill in this area. We want to give the idea that the eye's shiny, so I'm making it a little darker. Usually the shading will be the darkest next to the lightest, just to give it a little bit more contrast. And then I'll kind of gradually reduce my pressure just to fill in for the eye. And I might add a little bit more pressure here just to show the roundness of it. And then we're going to do the same thing with the cheekbone. I'm going to put just a little bit more pressure right here to show that there's a bit of a harder edge that's casting a shadow on the rest of the area. I'm going to come back right into the jawline. I'm going to put a little bit more pressure here, a little bit darker.
Yep, Lizzie, it looks like your video, oh, it's just lagging a little bit.
Oh, okay. All right, it might be the connection. Okay. And so I'm going to create a little bit more shading down here. And sometimes if you don't really have any sharp structures, you can just kind of lightly fill in that. I might put a little bit more pressure here just to show that this is the edge of a harder surface. And also to give the idea that it's projecting forward. I'm going to come back over here to the mouth. And this is a tool that it's not necessary because you can always use your finger or you can use a little bit of tissue. But this can help you blend in your drawing just a little bit more to create a little bit more contrast. And what's cool is that you can lift up some of the graphite and bring that to actually put in some subtle shading. And with this, there's no right or wrong way to use something like this. You can, your free tool is your finger too. You can blend that in. The whole idea is to get rid of anything that seems sharp. When you have a lot of sharp edges, that's kind of what the fine line between doing a cartoon versus something that's a little bit more realistic. So we're going to come in and fill in the mane. going to come back here and revisit the mouth. I'm going to make this just a little bit darker, so I'm adding just a little more pressure. I'm going to add just a little bit more subtle shading, just to give an idea that there's a little bit more structure happening there. The same with the nostril. And then I'm going to add a little bit of shadow right here. And this is a little bit of freeform shadow. We're just kind of doing a little bit to emphasize that the nostril area projects a little bit more. So you can always drag out a little bit of the shadow beyond some of the shapes that we drew, just to get a little bit more subtlety. So we'll go back to the neck muscle. So this might be, our sharpest line within the neck, just to show that there's a bit of a crevice there where the muscle's projecting. And then we're going to come into the mane, and we're going to emphasize the strands of the hair with a little bit of a darker, a little bit more pressure on your pencil. And you can even add maybe just a few little strands. And nothing that has to go all the way through. Because when light's coming through, you might not see like a perfectly defined strand. You might just see a little bit of a shadow, and the rest gets lost. So I'm just kind of lightly shade this in, so we have a little contrast between the light and the dark. And with hair and with fur, it's kind of good to go in the direction that it's flowing in. I'm going to create just a little bit more contrast here. And when I mean contrast, is just more a little bit of darkness, or a little bit of a difference between the light and your darks. And now we're going to go into the shape that's the ear. And we're going to fill that in. I'm sorry, I tend to jump around a little bit when I see something, but there's really no blueprint. This is just a great way to kind of turn off that inner doubt and that inner self-talk and take away the stress out of it. And that's why I didn't refer to it as a horse from the beginning. It's like if I said, oh, we're going to draw a horse today, I'm sure that would have created some form of anxiety. So what I'm going to do here is add just a little bit of shading, not too much, just a little bit of random shading. And I'm going to bring a little bit of shading right next to some of my darker shapes, just so we get the idea that there's a muscle there. just a little bit of shadow right here. And you can go in and blend with your finger. I'll demonstrate this tool again. They have a fancy French name that I can't pronounce, but they're also referred to as blending stumps. And they come in a variety of sizes, so I use this just to kind of get an idea of like where most of my shadow is going to go, and then if I want to kind of draw with it as well. You can also use a tissue on your finger, of course. Let me switch pencils here. Let's see, get a So another method that might be a little bit faster than coloring in is just using the side of your pencil and rotating it as well, keeping it. You can vary your pressure, but this will also keep your points sharp. I'm going to go back and revisit the main. And I'm going to soften any areas that it might need a little bit more shading in them, but without being too hard. So here I'm actually making my shape with the side of my pencil. And I'm going to go back and re-emphasize some of the areas that I'd like a little bit darker. There, I just put a little bit more pressure just to emphasize the sharpness. It doesn't have to be a consistent line. It could just be little areas where it's going to be a little bit further away from your light source.
Hi, Lizzie. Sorry to interrupt. It's Adrian. So I think the event was it's almost 2 o'clock. Do you want to open it up for questions or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. We've got our horse, so yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mine looks great.
That's awesome. I'm expecting everybody has a great horse head. It's going to be in your style, so remember, it's not going to look like mine. Mine won't look like yours. Everybody's just like when you get to an art museum, you're going to see, a whole bunch of different, let's say an example, somebody paints a queen. Hundreds of people have painted the queen, but they're always going to be different. So any questions? Or sorry about that. That's my pipes.
So if there's any questions you guys can ask or type them into the chat. And while you're doing that,
How much?
I'm sorry. Somebody
Go ahead,
have a
Adrian,
question?
sorry.
I was just gonna thank Miss Ochoa for being here. Thank you so much, Lizzie, for being here and for providing a great presentation. Also, thank you for everybody who came. Remember, you can get Tejano passport points by clicking on the link in the chat. And also, just very quickly, next week on Wednesday at 1 p.m., we will have a presentation by the Centers for Students with Disabilities on services, technology, and sign language. And on Friday at 1 p.m., we're going to have Mr. Jeremy Perales, kinesiology faculty. He's going to be presenting on fitness. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and have a great weekend. And stay safe out there.
Well, thank you all for your attention, and I hope it took a little bit of the fear of drawing and the fact that you all are creative problem solvers. It doesn't have anything to do with talent. It just has to do with ability and practice, observation and practice. Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Anybody has questions, let us know.